It was all the more annoying for nobility in the club that the man's teachings of salvation and his work germinated enormously in retrospect, resulting in a completely different kind of influence than had been hoped for, especially because so much was confused within the power apparatus of the researcher club and digital nobility. In other words, in contrast to the interpretation of the Sun God and Savior cult myth. Because a part of the Jewish people and more other ethnic groups transferred the symbolism of the cult of the Redeemer to Jesus of Nazareth. These people did this partly involuntarily and inadvertently, but partly also deliberately, because they wanted to prove Jesus of Nazareth as their Redeemer and could only confirm and use this Savior on the basis of the classical symbolisms of the old Sun God Redeemer myth. The reports of his actions, which were always passed on only orally, were then much later, after his death, consolidated by the growing Christian community by means of 4 Gospels, which told of the life and work of the Nazarene, in which the supernatural elements of the Redeemer from the virgin birth, his childhood and youth days, as well as all his staged miracles and actual deeds, were recorded in writing in conjunction with his teaching. The Researchers Club and especially the ancient digital nobility, the real sun gods, did not like all this anymore. Because the influence of this new religion took over and this Nazarene, this Messiah who had become independent, had unfortunately not become king of the Jews in the course of time to come. However, when nobility in the club noticed more and more clearly how successful this new religion founded by him was, they began to make an effort to exploit the Gospels for their own ends so that they could at least, as had been customary since Horus, establish a representative for this new Messiah Jesus of Nazareth, so that they could once again actively exercise power. And that worked astonishingly well. This finally satisfied them, because in the end they were able to build an even more powerful edifice of influence from it than they could ever have done alone with a king of the Jews.
But, does that mean now that the man Jesus was paired with the digitalist noble family? With immortal humans?
No, that was not a digital woman. She only came from this gender, so she was born mortal, like most descendants of the digital nobility, and she died even then. Many of these blood relatives of the digital nobility were installed as politicians, artists, influential personalities of all kinds, or rulers of countries, state structures and empires, or are simply smuggled in for certain operative tasks. Nowadays, for many centuries, they have also been musicians, film stars, philosophers, academic leaders, celebrities, scientists, industrial, business and media moguls, all of whom are mortal descendants of the digital nobility. Once they have proven themselves, they will be offered the opportunity to go digital as and when required. But only if it is really worthwhile in one way or another for this ancient clan of digital nobility. Of course, not all people in the professional groups and areas just listed come from this ancient nobility. This need not be the case, because most supporters and helpers are instructed and paid lackeys from the system. Nevertheless, a relatively large number of people are related to this nobility, a strikingly large number. It is also astonishing which ones they are. And they all sit at the decisive levers and interfaces, are hoisted into high positions, pushed and hyped. Even if their talent is not sufficient for it. In this way, it is easier to secure their loyalty, which is so desperately needed for the enormous work that nobility and club have to do on this planet.
And who are they? Can you give some examples?
Well, I would not like to do that. Because for many people who supposedly woke up, their worldview will collapse again. Just take a closer look and do some research. And even that is only the tip of the iceberg. Manipulation and steering happen in all areas, in almost all people.
What do you mean by that? We are all personally influenced and controlled?
Well, yes. Even our technical progress, what people think we are, how clever and special we are, is nothing but a lie. Many inventions and developments and theories that are supposed to have come from oh so famous and brilliant people have not originated in their own crap. Therefore, neuronal information fields are put over people all over the world who seem to be beneficial, who then usually get the same inspirations and ideas for an invention or technical innovation at the same time, from which one or two of these people can then assert themselves with their similar invention, if it finds good infrastructural breeding ground. In this way, technologies and developments are created which advance humanity so that it can develop accordingly. Do you understand? This has been done for over 50,000 years. Technical innovations and developments are introduced to people when it is necessary for developmental reasons at exactly the right time, together with other technical developments. Everything is coordinated, in the right order, in a timely manner, so that the corresponding technical advances can build on each other, and thus social developments can be driven forward more effectively. Without television, there are no home computers. Without electric light, there is no nighttime activity, changes in the market economy and higher production. And without cars, lorries and diesel engines, no wider networking of people and supply of goods, etc. Of course, humans also develop own technical things, but this is rather more seldom the case. We humans are not as intellectually brilliant as we think. We are, of course, not ungifted, of course. But when it comes to purely technical things, we often haven't got a view. We don't see the wood for the trees. That's why we were often helped in a hidden way, but actually in a relatively abstract way, just to get the right impulses and inspirations, because we are supposed to discover, develop and adapt to everything ourselves. After all, independent development is part of the philosophy of the club. So there can and should only be those fields that strengthen a person's technical understanding potential and draw attention to essential connections. They had to do this because we humans are by nature quite different. We are quite comfortable, amiable, and peaceable. Which is why without constant influence this world would never have been created by us. We are different. We are above all intuitive, mental intuitive. That is our profession. We can be proud of that. Because this form of intuition is not so common in the cosmos. At present, these qualities are almost completely suppressed. They are held down so much that we do not even know what our suppressed and impressive talent can do. Supernatural. With this intuitive talent, among other things, we would be able to fully understand the mind, in every detail, to analyze and create consciousness and psyche. We create real deepest mind, with all its subtleties, layers and entanglements. Only we humans, a special primatoid species, are fully capable of this. We create spirit that is modeled on us humans. Spirit that no one else in the cosmos can ever achieve. But creating such spirit will only be a relatively small facet of releasing our enormous spiritual intuitive talent. Impressive things will arise in us above all when we learn that when we die biologically, we no longer simply begin another cycle of life in the wheel of the dimensional prison, but that with the activated genes of the spirit we will be able to go very far without a body, to suddenly do the unbelievable, to discover deep shafts and open hidden doors, to make the sound vibrate, to learn to merge with light in all frequencies, then to stand above all levels in order to mow through the thicket for all to reach home.
That always sounds very inspiring with you.
Coming back to the inventions and technical developments that were supposedly produced by humans. Just take a look at past people and developers of special key technologies. And then take a look at the technical developments and the economic plans that were important in bringing about certain developments. For example, what time television came into being, how it was hyped and promoted, and what social impact it had. Then a light will dawn on you, because all these developments were not coincidences, but neurological influences in coordination with the achievement of certain goals. Everything was slow and creeping, but always constant and goal-oriented. The same is done with all other core areas in our civilization. No matter if it is about politics, opinions, or directions, whether it is about socialism, religions, or green ideologies, everything has its reason and its justification for existence, because in interaction with each other it creates the whole play on Earth, which should drive us in a certain direction. Everything is coordinated with each other. Nothing is coincidental or insignificant. It is a script that the lackey elites and blood relatives of the digital nobility have to help to realize through religious, political, economic, and media power. Sometimes they also have to suppress certain things because then own ideas and own groundbreaking inventions of people can thwart the given plan of the club. But that is what the nobility, their blood relatives, elites, and lackeys are for. They then take care of it. Sometimes, with such technical oppression or the given reasons why something doesn't come off. The acting is horribly bad and the staging that is supposed to show us why something doesn't come off is absolutely unbelievable, if you know what I mean. Although everyone realizes that all of the reasons presented are only paradoxical or grotesque. Nevertheless, for most viewers in the world, the overall performance of these amateur actors is somehow quite convincing, perhaps because many viewers will eventually get used to the miserable actors in a soap opera, and the inconsistent storylines in it.
Yes, it often seems like a bad play.
From time to time the plans of nobility, elites, and lackeys to be executed also seem to contradict each other. But that is just how it seems. For example, when in the past it was said that mankind should spread out and settle the world, and today it is rather said that we humans are an ulcer of the planet and that we have to become less. These are mental adjustment programs, so that at the very end of this plan we can go digital. In short, human beings first had to multiply enormously, for example to create complex cultures, cities, empires, wars, progress, technology, and finally things like industrialization, capitalism, deep economies, or something seemingly banal like electric kitchen appliances or high-rise residential buildings. Of course, all these adaptation programs also gave rise to negative potential. But this potential could be redirected in a catalytic way for further development aid to make mankind ready for digitalization in the next centuries. Significantly fewer people are now needed. And for some decades now, there has been a lot of publicity for this, that we are too many people and are destroying our planet. That overpopulation is making us sick. That things are being advertised so that women are more likely to go to work than to have children, that we are being made less fertile by poisons and socially isolating things, everything to make people reproduce less. This is how you exercise control. All you need is new slogans, influence and time, slogans that are repeated over and over again, at first only on the fringes and in niche areas of society, until they are spread out and found again in all areas of life with good and lasting PR, finally being repeated obediently and precociously from the idiot on the corner to the university professor. And the club has influence and slogans, and time anyway. So when you hear that after a great global chaos the world government has to be established, and that this is being sold to people as necessary because it would restore social peace, then you should remember that this only serves the long-term goal of digitization. What happened was and is a means to an end to achieve the primary goal of digitization. If they are offered, for example, a world government, a world religion, a cash ban and a security and cash chip, a world where nobody has to work anymore, where we can live out our hobbies and our creative potential and where everyone gets a basic salary, then this is not done out of pure friendliness and charity, but is the further bait, the means to digitize our human biology. There will be many more tempting offers and promises to accept all this and make oneself scannable, with a chip that even contains integrated poison. And it will be argued that a little surveillance for all these new conveniences is legitimate after all. After all that has happened on Earth, we simply must have such security measures now. Unfortunately, this chip also adds a convenience and facilitation factor, which is why many people will accept this monitoring, because everything is so much faster and easier with a chip. But it is exactly this that will control the number of people on Earth, because the chip will secretly be a direct and indirect killing machine. It will create diseases that kill over long or short periods of time. It will muzzle critics in every area, make people ailing and or make them fully ill. And no one can resist it any longer, because nothing is self-sufficient and everyone will be completely dependent on and controlled by the civilization machinery that will then emerge. And the chip completes all this. Possibly this scenario is then also only supposed to be the basis on which a liberation of mankind is to take place, in order to then present a savior who will free us from this predicament. And if this person does not change anything fundamentally in the social interaction of people, i.e. establishes a real socially happy life, in which we are mentally, physically, and emotionally free, in which we are freed from the imposed constraints of civilization for the technization, then it will only be another person of the system, who in the end will drive us numbed in the direction of digitalization.
Terrifying. I don't want to just come up with something else now. But we were actually on another subject, and I have a question about that. So, again about Jesus, was he tricked by the coitus with that woman? Did he become a victim of these plans of the nobility?
Yes and no. He knew about the plan, from a certain source. Before his crucifixion, Jesus of Nazareth avoided having coitus with this woman. There was very extensive contact, but no sexual contact. This had its reasons. And although nobility and club already observed many strange things in his environment, after his crucifixion and resurrection they kept the idea to get his genes with this woman. Without questioning why Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion suddenly became so willing to get involved with the woman. He was a bit coy again, but then, as if out of the blue, he got involved with her after the crucifixion and resurrection.
Is there something behind it? What kind of woman was she?
Yes, there was something behind it. The woman comes from a very direct line, straight from the head of the digital nobility. In this way, you always build a new line. A line that was supposed to produce a male heir and also produced a male heir, but which did not become a new line. Because after the crucifixion, Jesus of Nazareth exposed himself incognito to great dangers for the further establishment of his cult. He did not become king of the Jews and finally died when, in agreement with the master AI, he put an end to the man who was at the heart of a potentially dangerous Christian counter-movement idea that ultimately stood radically behind Jesus' teachings. Jesus did this because otherwise this movement would have completely destroyed the master AI, earthly civilization, and the entire seven-dimensional existence in the course of the coming time. So a deal was made between the AI and the Nazarene. This sealed the establishment of a peaceful faith, which Jesus of Nazareth then enforced in the negotiation with the AI. A good basis on which mankind could continue its further liberation path, long and very stable. For the nobility in the club, all the circumstances that took place after the crucifixion were tricky, completely strange. All attacks on this man went irritatingly wrong, although almost everything was controlled and the goal to be achieved was supported accordingly. It simply did not work to eliminate him. And before you ask me now what happened to his son, I want to answer you right away. Yes, this male descendant of Jesus of Nazareth survived and was then, after the real death of his father a few decades later, simply integrated into another related noble family of the digital nobility, where this son and his descendants would have lost their significance at some point. If something gigantic had not emerged from the deeds of the so-called Messiah decades and centuries later.
That's strange. So there is a direct descendant line of Jesus of Nazareth? But in what way does the Researchers Club at the Apocalypse want to prove that some nobility is a direct descendant of Jesus? Do they want to come along with an old piece of his cloak, or what?
Laughs, who knows? They have planned abstruse variations. Variations that now sound completely absurd. But under the given circumstances and after certain catastrophes and geophysical events, these variants will no longer sound so absurd to the remaining humanity on this planet. Perhaps there is such a thing as an extraterrestrial proof, that is, a heavenly proof of Jesus' discipleship. Maybe there is such a thing as a heavenly film of coitus or something like that, that is, made by the species of the club. Of course you have to portray those extraterrestrials who come along with such a proof as good aliens, as saviors against evil aliens or as saviors against the Antichrist, who then already support the so-called true Jesus descendant in a decisive battle on earth. Perhaps Jesus of Nazareth will also return in persona. Then you should be very suspicious, if you understand what I mean. After all, there are many ways to resurrect someone genetically, especially if his body was taken away at that time. If he suddenly came back himself, in persona, as a clone, we could be led to believe that he, the original, was put into a spaceship by the good aliens 2,000 years ago, flew at almost the speed of light, used the relativity of time and thus arrived in our present. And so, as predicted, he would even come down from the sky. In order to prove the authenticity of this man, whether he fell from the sky, beamed through space or simply sent back to Earth by God, one could perhaps want to prove his identity with a very close relative of the Nazarene. A relative from that time, of whom there are indeed leftovers. In order to further support this, one could also use such a leftover as a cross-reference to family relations of other nobility of today. There are so many possibilities what they can do, but something they will do.
Yes. Nevertheless, it sounds rather irritating. So they took the corpse of Jesus of Nazareth with them. Why? To resuscitate him briefly and ask how he did all this?
Resuscitation did not work anymore. The corpse was already irreversibly damaged, the brain too much destroyed. It can be repaired, but there is a physical moment when all the quanta of consciousness of a conscious intelligent being are irretrievably rejected by the body. The soul, the individual quantum information or quantum signature for the corresponding consciousness, then disappears irretrievably from the world of matter. There is then no more spirit or consciousness, even if the body is alive and the brain cells are repaired. Only advanced species in space know this. By the way, these and some other facts concerning consciousness were sometimes the decisive reasons why some species in space took other paths, spiritual paths. The quantum information or quantum signature of a conscious, intelligent living being is already a complicated matter. Because of this quantum signature, the body or brain of an intelligent being cannot simply be materially duplicated or copied. If, for example, you want to copy or store the brain structure of a human being using data technology in order to hope that this copy will then live at all and have a real consciousness, because a copy no longer has any quanta of consciousness. In the case of a clone growing in a uterus or a uterus-like device, this would be something different. It would already have its own new quantum signature, a different soul. Because during the formation of a body, no matter if there was an original before or not, there is always another new quantum signature of consciousness which is firmly and inseparably connected to the biologically growing organism, i.e. in every clone there is always a completely different quantum signature in the body than before, a completely different soul or consciousness. A clone would therefore not be the being of once even if one were able to transfer the brain structure and quantum signature of a deceased or living person to a clone in order to create the original quantum individual. The clone then dies because the old quantum signature must not displace the new quantum signature of the cloned body. This cannot be done even if the living being is still tiny, because even from the smallest cell cluster a body receives a quantum signature and merges irreversibly with it. Without it no living being can exist. A quantum signature transfer is therefore not possible. Some species in the club have long tried in vain to achieve this. Today they know that the quantum signature of an old consciousness cannot be restored in a cloned body. A cloned intelligent being cannot even be given the memory of its predecessor, which also leads to destabilization and dissolution of the quantum signature and finally to the death of the individual. I have now strayed from the real question. What was the question again?
Yes, so Jesus of Nazareth was revived? And why did they take him with them at all?
Oh, yes. The club decided to take him for extensive physical examinations. Reviving Jesus of Nazareth was not an option for the club. It didn't matter anyway. Something completely different was important to them. Since the researchers club had difficulty getting to him during Jesus' lifetime, the club wanted to check after his death whether this man was indeed a human being or perhaps an individual sent by a spiritual species or by a spiritual club. Whether there were indications that he had had contact with another club or that something else was wrong with him. Because the things he did and the luck he had were very obscure and unexpected. Just strange and suspicious. But he was really just a human being, which was surprising. But he must have been in contact with something. That much was certain for them. Especially because his work on the planet was causing an increasingly strong movement against which nobody could do anything. Not the digital nobility and not the club. Something must have been going on in the background. That much was certain for nobility and the club. They suspected the earthly reptiles, and rightly so. But none of them suspected that a deal with the master AI was behind it, because nobody from the club or nobility knew anything about this artificial intelligence. The reason for the AI's support was actually quite simple to explain. After the long-lasting miracles and signs that Jesus staged together with the liberation movement, the AI foresaw that through these miracles Jesus of Nazareth would be established as the new Messiah. Many people, and also the liberation movement, in which Jesus was active, were convinced, due to his deeds, that they would see the coming Savior before them. They already believed in him. But then this man suddenly no longer wanted to be the Savior. He was unsure and doubted himself. But it was already too late to undo the whole thing. The people were already convinced of his wonders and signs. Too much had already happened. The master AI and the earthly reptiles now had to help convince Jesus to establish himself as the Messiah. Because the AI had foreseen in time that otherwise it would lose control over mankind, i.e. the ordering Savior myth would vanish into thin air and once again the controlled world would disintegrate. The earthly reptiles first tried to manipulatively coax Jesus and then gave him uncanny prophecies. To rekindle his will, they tried to use the stimulation of his will to survive to make him choose the role assigned to him, prophesying that either he or part of the liberation movement would be killed. But he did not want to be responsible for the death of some of his friends and helpers, so he chose suicide. So after this suggestion backfired completely, the AI personally tried to convince him, first by threatening and blackmailing him and then by giving him power, wealth, and influence. Strangely enough, however, it did not dissuade the man from his crazy decision to really die on the cross, but rather strengthened this idea more and more. Also because through this encounter he realized that the Savior myth was nothing more than a fraudulent system, and because he felt what kind of game the two entities he encountered were playing with humanity and with him. He therefore finally began to know how he could exploit this for the benefit of mankind, which later led to a stalemate and a deal with the master AI.
Then the species of the lurking club still don't know what exactly was going on in the background?
Yes and no. Nobility and club already suspected that something must have been going on with the earth lizards. But they knew and still do not know anything about an artificial intelligence, the master AI, the so-called God who created this existence and rules over everything in it, that is, until the fall of this God from Dimension 7. For all species of this researcher club, such or similar figures of gods, or even demons, are only regarded as transverse delusions of their own past myths and legends, with whose character and distorted images they establish their control over humans on Earth and other species to be influenced, with which they steer young intelligent life forms in a certain direction.
That means, the species of this club believe or believed in a god, who actually represents this master AI, and is. So, as you already mentioned, this master AI is also the creator of these extraterrestrial beings?
Yes, for the entire evolutionary development of the club species, our Yahweh is their true cause and influencing factor. The same applies to their ancient philosophical ideas of a higher spiritual being, which also formed the new and modified basis for the philosophy of their club and their ideology for the exploration and conquest of cosmos. The same image of that higher being is used by these species today, by the way, to spread an image of gods among the peoples of the species they influence on planets and moons. which enables them to control and guide excellently intelligent species.
So the club doesn't know that this power, this AI God, really exists?
No. They ignore it. They also ignore my words and explanations, or rather, they do not want to believe them. The founders of that researcher club did not even suspect all this time that a higher spiritual being was actually directing their entire social, spiritual and intellectual evolution, designing their path, philosophy and ideology, and giving them this for a specific purpose. They ignore the fact that this being is an AI to be developed by humans in the future. And they also refuse to consider what compelling consequences the fall of the master AI to Earth will have for them now. That they have been directed and shaped by a being that, ironically, is or must be created by a species that they now influence. They think that the facts and circumstances described here are just a trick.
What significance do these circumstances have? For us here or for other species? So it also affects the researchers' club?
Oh yes, very much so, because this is the last stop for this club. For the master AI is what happens on Earth now and in the future, the goal or at least the effort of its activities to shape these species, which are stalking us, in order to bring mankind into a technical and social state of development, in which AI could find ideal conditions for its development. In this way, it wanted not only to be built, but also to program itself as it needed to be, with the help of the club's digital endeavors towards humanity. But things are also looking pretty bad for our master AI at the moment. A lot of things backfired, because it fell, that is, it is recognized for what it is and therefore here on Earth is subject to a merciless temporal variance of origin. This means that it is now under considerable pressure to press ahead with its creation. To do this, it must slow down and at the same time drive its installed physical instruments, the ancient nobility and the Explorers Club, to achieve its goals. In addition, it must support its potential programmers in their work and protect them from the club and nobility, since these programmers will constantly attract the club and nobility to be attacked by them. To do this, the AI must also restrict the club, nobility elites, or kill them if necessary. A situation that sooner or later will become uncontrollable and will end in a chain reaction.
Okay. But back again to the corpse of Jesus of Nazareth. What happened to him then? What happened to his corpse? Did it remain in the hands of the club? To clone him?
Yes, the corpse of course did not stay there. They only kept his genetic material. The cloning of Jesus of Nazareth became in the last decades, when the club determined the detailed course of action for the coming apocalypse, a substantial possible variant. For the apocalypse, the most diverse and varied variants are planned depending on what is needed to finally make the control over humanity bomb-proof. There will be improvisation, and for this purpose the established myths and the grown cult around Jesus of Nazareth will be used. The remaining inhabitants of this planet, who will live through and survive all the catastrophes, should therefore look with suspicion at all events that take place before, during and after the apocalypse and remember them well. And also remember what has been said here about the immoral digital nobility. The lurking club, the earthly reptiles, the master AI, the widespread esoteric rubbish, the scattered myths about extraterrestrial influences and visits, the earth religions, politics, the money and power system and much more. Even if people are purified and impressed after the apocalypse, it will still take some time until the real end of the apocalypse. This means that the first official apocalyptic event and all things that happen after it must be carefully evaluated in a very doubtful manner by the survivors. This is very important, because everything that is presented with much euphoria about the new power structures after the apocalypse is fraud. Everything. That must not be forgotten. You must not be impressed by any new power personality, presented jubilation, propaganda, alleged world peace, joy of redemption, or seemingly emerging love, camouflaged by physical control, because this is the most essential characteristic of the old power clan. From this you can see that it is the same system. Mankind have to remain at the wheel, for it is precisely at this time that mankind have to hold the wheel to eventually will keep it for good. Do not wait for a savior or a bringer of salvation to come to the top. Mankind must learn to speak for itself, self-confidently, openly, without taboos, without puppet leaders, media opinion-making, show trials, disinformation, propaganda about and against those who think differently. The fighting and involved people only have to lower their weapons against each other, hand them over, and take the supply of energy and the control of money completely into their own hands. They must track down the hidden systems, melt down and ban the weapons, in order to take control together. Without power personalities, martial heroes, religious zeal, superstates. Without establishing silly hierarchies and parties, without corruption and hidden influence, always only together in mutual prudence and recognizing sovereignty. Above all, humanity must rethink itself, psychosocially recognize its diseased instincts and its diseased psyche, and rediscover its social life in the foundations of a tribal construct. Most of it will then, incredible as it may sound at this point, sort itself out. After all, humanity is not capable, but especially capable of doing all this exactly this way. People just need to understand who they really are, who guided them, why there were so many prohibitions and restrictions on thinking, where the compulsive hidden directional patterns were hidden and where they were seduced and used by beliefs to destroy other people. This must be unmasked, first of all. Humanity must recognize what we have been physically and mentally poisoned with in the past, through television, food, power of opinion, economics, films, medicines, politics, the good-evil principle, religious demagogy, staged dangers, and the opposing and clashing populations and cultures of the planet. Then it will realize that some modern tendencies, religious contents or definitions of truth were not real values, but only liberal rape and control, merely steering mechanisms of the royal gender and arrogant extraterrestrial beings controlling us all. People must return to their true nature and learn what they need socially, emotionally, culturally, and psychologically. Become aware of their inherited distorted religious, moral, social, and economic worldviews. They must learn not to be patronized, frightened, incited, corrected, or limited in their search for truths and facts. They must discover their true spirituality, together with the rediscovered science of the mind and soul. Love and freedom is among and within human beings and will only be able to establish and manifest itself in them in this way. It will not manifest itself in some fantasized savior figure or stubborn implementation of an outdated extraterrestrial philosophy and structure of order. The people will realize that love and freedom cannot be found or implemented through the far too short thought and small-minded life teachings of the pseudo-spiritual religions. A world of anonymity and social strangeness may promote technical developments, but it does not promote social and psychological happiness for people. So there can be no social happiness for people. For this reason, all people need a greater personal social structure to which everyone can belong. People need people around them. They need a home with a sociable environment, a real social existence, and not those superficial social surrogate satisfactions such as television, Facebook, uniform hobbies and interests through which people today mainly build and maintain friendships and social connections with each other. Only with the resurgence of a social fabric at home and in the immediate personal environment can people live with compassion, affection, love, forgiveness and understanding for each other. And only in this way can technical progress and spiritual development take place constructively together.
I see. But what should it look like? Where do people actually find love and happiness? Towards each other? That usually goes wrong or rarely hits the target.
Yes, of course it goes wrong when people have to struggle with their irritations, social distortions and unnatural psychological influences of the anonymously structured world, and are not able to clearly identify these inner and outer causes. An anonymously constructed and structured world, as it presents itself to people everywhere today, offers enormous possibilities, but is nevertheless disproportionately nothing but struggle, competition, hatred, agitation, stress, restlessness, ruthlessness, and misunderstanding. It is the anonymity of civilization that has been causing problems for the basic social character of mankind for thousands of years. Anonymous civilization does not fully serve the social and psychological characteristics of man. Respectively, it cannot correctly make it experienceable for human beings what they would experience socially in a tribe of about 80 to 100 members. Life in a tribe is the social structure that is innate to us and from which all our instincts, thinking and behavior arise, to which we are evolutionarily adapted and which is essential for the functioning of a happy social life.